ECX Temper Gen 2. So we are on the workbench here today. This is Roadside RC. We are going to do all sorts of what we think are free modifications to this. So we recently had a video where we did the unboxing, first test drive, first run of this ECX Temper, and we noticed a few things right out of the box that it really needs worked on. Steering, total amount of steering that this truck has is not great. And it is limited by a couple things that we noticed. It's limited by a steering limiter in here, and it's limited by this rod hitting the front. No, those things might be there for a very good reason, but we're going to modify those, and that should allow us to have some extra steering. The other thing is, even though this truck is so small, it's actually fairly top heavy. You'll notice that almost all the weight is above the center line of the wheels by a fair amount. And so we are going to do some cheap modifications to try to get this truck to sit way down low like this. It'll look really, really cool. And then too, hopefully it'll actually be much more stable. Other thing that we noticed, tires seem soft, but they don't seem like they bite very well, that they grip very well. So we might come in here. We want these tires to sit down a little bit more. So we're going to come in here and do some cutting on these tires in order to get them a little bit softer, a little bit more open, so that hopefully they're actually biting a little bit better. And then lastly, in the battery compartment in here, it'll only fit that super awkward shaped battery that it comes with. We want to maybe open this thing up and see if there's a way that we can get some of the small 2000 milliamp hour 2S batteries that we have to fit in there. Free and cheap mods to the ECX Temper today. So follow along, let's get this started. One of the first things we're going to do to this truck is what we call the pin spring mod. These springs that come with it appear to be too stiff really for the weight of the vehicle, and they appear to sit all the way at the top of the travel, which we want it to get down in a little bit more. So what we're going to do is we're going to steal the pins, the springs out of some pins, and we're actually going to put them inside the shock, between the bottom of the shock and the top of the piston, and that'll soften it up and should bring the whole thing down. So we have all four shocks off the vehicle. We now need to get them disassembled. It means pulling the small spring retainer, taking the spring off, and then using your handy dandy shock pliers to help hold the shock. We'll use a couple other pair of pliers to open this top part. Done. Nice diaphragm in there. We're going to end up dumping out the oil because it's just going to come out anyway. So we're going to go ahead, dump that out, and look, this shock is already actually fairly low on oil. So this is going to be good that we're going to get a chance to rebuild it while we're here anyway. We're going to get way up here. We're going to take this bottom shock link off. And then what that allows us to do is then push the piston all the way up and out. Okay, so here's the spring that we have out of the pin that was taken apart. We're simply going to put that on this side. We're going to then put this whole thing right back together again. Alright, so then we got to use shock fluid of our choice. This is actually some leftover shock oil, I believe, from our G-made shocks that we used and put on another vehicle. So you need to hold it down. Boop, boop. There we go.
It's filled. Well, that's perfect.
Of course, we're going to pump this a little bit, get some air bubbles out of it. Oh yeah, lots of air bubbles in that one. Okay, here you can see the difference between two shocks as they came and now two shocks that we have modified. And so there is quite a difference in the length of those shocks. That's because that spring is in there helping to make it actually sit in the middle of that shock travel. So now it easily moves out in, but it also has a little bit of rebound out to it also. Whereas before, these shocks sit all the way to the out, no matter what, all the way out, rebounded out. and they only had inward travel. It turns out it also moves a whole lot smoother when they're full of oil. So if you get one of these, check it out anyway. They're not going to have oil in them. And just like that, look at this. This truck is already looking significantly better. Way down, closer to the ground, should tip a whole lot less. Still has down travel, still has up travel, still has plenty of flex to go over anything that we need it to go flexing over, but yet it's, since the center of gravity is now significantly lower than it was before, much less likely for the whole truck to tip over. And it literally cost, I guess, what, some springs out of some pens or something like that. Like, that's literally, we just had to lay them around. We just, my son took them apart and we stuck them in there. Fluid I had left over from something else just laying around. Better. All right. The next piece of this puzzle is the steering. So trying to get it to where we have more steering angle for the front of this vehicle. And again, we're going to be working on two pieces. We're working on the little nubs that we have in here that'll actually stop the steering from going. And we're going to be taking off this front longer linkage and bending it so that it doesn't hit the front of the axle. Oh wow, that trims off very easily. Alright, now this is not rocket science here, we just need to bend this whole bar. But one thing you'll want to do is mark how long is it before you get started, because if you bend it, obviously what's going to happen is it's going to make it shorter. We're going to have to extend out these adjustable ends here to keep the total length the same. Otherwise, we're going to be changing the steering geometry of the vehicle. And just like that, a couple seconds with the vise, we are now trimmed. And you can see there's a little bit of a gap here. So all we got to do is unscrew both of these a small amount and get it back to the same length. All right, all back together, we're now able to reset our steering endpoints to take advantage of this whole new width. And it does not appear that it binds the CVDs or anything when you get to that higher angle. So we are in good shape. Check that out. Probably need to still limit it down a little bit, but man, we are good. That should help us a lot out there trying to get around the course. Next part of our free modifications is going to be cutting these tires, and we're basically going to be doing two things to it. One, again, you'll see that this is actually it's a 2-row pattern. So you have 2 rows that are closer together, a gap, 2 rows that are closer together, a gap. That small gap between the 2 rows isn't enough to allow the tire to actually grip anything. My plan is to come in here and actually straight line these. So this comes across here and is cut, this comes along here is cut. You can actually see I've already done it right here on this one. So it opens up this whole groove a lot by taking those 2 out. It's going to give that a much biting edge. So that's part one. The second part is actually here on this shoulder. What you have is you have a big shoulder, small shoulder, right? So big shoulder, small shoulder with a notch in it. What we're doing is exaggerating that notch by cutting it off. So we're going to cut this whole bottom piece out of this notch, and that's going to leave more clearance for this next edge right here to grip on things, because this isn't in the way. So this is all going to get snipped off. These are going to get cut off. All right, now the simple one of these 2 cuts is that small lug on the side. Simply pinch it up and take a pair of side cutters and snip, and that whole lug comes off. The only thing you want to watch is don't get too deep, or you'll end up into the carcass of the tire and you'll create a hole. But it happens. All that does is you can just watch it, make sure it's not too deep. And if you really need to, you could always just like glue it back. But snip, that goes all the way around. The second aspect of this is these bigger lugs. So what we're going to do here is come in, pinch the tire up with a knife. We're going to work our way in on it a little bit, work our way this direction. Just super sharp blade, small pressure, and it will come right off. If you feel more comfortable like I do, especially for something as small as this, grab it with a pair of needle nose. You can pinch it up. You can grab it with those needle nose, and then your finger is not in the way. because you will get your finger. So there's that piece, and then it's just the exact same thing on the other side of that pair of lugs. Boop, there you go. Both of those are cut. Just continue all the way around all 4 tires. And just like that, it took a little while, but tires are all cut. We even drilled them. So one of the things we typically do on our tires is actually drill them to let water out. And so we have cut, and you can see they are cut on all sides, drilled. All right, last thing that we're going to do to this, we are going to come in here and we are going to see if we can't mod this battery tray to accept one of our 2S or 3S small batteries that we typically use in our crawlers. Alright, so we have taken off the hood. We have taken out the, I guess you could technically call this a interior. Not really much of one, honestly, but we've taken out the interior. So then when you look at the battery compartment itself, my goal here was to be able to take off part of this rear tray, part of this front tray, in order to be able to allow this 2200 milliamp 2S battery to fit in there. But as you can see, what's going to happen is it doesn't really matter, because the battery is long enough that what's going to happen is it's going to hit this gearbox anyway. So we have 2 choices. We actually can get the battery in here like this and just sacrifice this interior, which I am completely fine with. I already have a couple of these batteries. We actually even have some 3S, and so if we up the speed control, we can give some more power to it. That 3S would fit in there, all of that. I'm completely fine with that, but my partner in crime, not okay with that, are you? Jamesy wants the interior, and so what we're gonna do, we're just gonna leave this, because modifying this battery tray does not really help us at all, and we're just gonna find a little 2S battery that actually fits in that hole. Maybe at a later date, I'll be able to convince him to get rid of the interior, and we can make a plate that goes right here that fits all the batteries, but not today. So this is where we're stopping. We're gonna put all this back together, and then we need to test this thing out. Dude, so really happy with this thing. It really seemed to have done better out there on the crawler course. A lot more stable because of the lower down, a lot more stable. I think the tire cutting did help. We do have, it seems like, a little bit more traction. Overall, pretty happy. Still, the steering, oh my gosh, that steering is so much better. It is ridiculous. That was probably worth every little bit of it. So the next thing really still is maybe trying to actually do the electronics on it, throw a new speed control, throw the new receiver and controller at it. But maybe what we're going to do first is actually just drive it. We have an opportunity to go to the Big Buddha's RC Ranch here coming up pretty soon. Maybe actually just drive it there, see what it looks like, see how it does, and we'll get back. So hey, in the meantime, come over, watch some of our other videos, some of our drifting or other crawling videos, other how-to videos, and we will see you guys later. Goodbye.